Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so this
In the office, we're about to go live.
we are live.
We are live.
Okay, so this is streaming. Okay, so you can hear that Skype scene
Yeah.
and all the others, so you know how to
Okay.
click. Okay.
All right. Are you loading up, Julia?
Yeah, I'm just I'm like on the menu.
You should talk about that.
What?
You should talk about lag.
Do I need to share my screen?
Tutorial.
About what?
Lag.
It's not lag. It's just setting up.
Should mention that everything is running on frames, so that if the bullet goes to that player and there is lag, then the frame will lag and it will not hit the player.
I'm not going into concepts that deep, man.
So ask her to share the screen. Pause the chat with her because we can see the chat over there. Okay, and you guys are starting in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Or something like that, okay?
Okay.
So screen is live, you can see it on my monitor right over there.
Yeah.
So you can see it very good, that's YouTube.
Yep. Sounds good. Yeah. Whenever you're ready, Julia, to share your screen, let me know. And I'll tell you when you have the mic.
You wait for
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. Hold on. I'll do an introduction anyway, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we're going live in like 40 seconds, so.
And then you might get good at it, but you still cannot.
Yeah, so exactly. That's the thing. So
I'll mute myself for a second.
not like if I'm actually talking to someone, it's very hard for me to use the grammar inside
Yeah,
the sentence.
but your pronunciation sounds really.
Yeah, my verb.
Right, we're about to start, guys.
Great. Go down the.
Alright, here we go. Alright. Hello, everyone. Yeah, today we're gonna go over Unity, a little bit of an introduction to game design and game development. So, as most of you guys know, we've been working on a game called, a world called Blender. It's kind of like a metaverse kind of thing. So Julia is gonna do a quick introduction first, showing what we've done for like 10 minutes, and then after that I'll go over Unity, a little bit of the fundamentals, and then we'll work on making a UI. So yeah, I'll give the word to Julia so she can actually showcase what we've done. There you go. There you go.
Hello. This is the menu scene of Blender Worlds, which is the UI that essentially, you load in the menu scene, and then when you start the game, it loads the actual game, so they're separate. So you can log in here, so you'd put in your password and log in, but it remembers you every time. And then you have the the graphics you can kind of edit, like depending on like your screen size and things like that, and you can like save the settings. So this all saves, and then when you pick your character, it also saves. So every time you go on, it does that. I'm kind of blabbing a bit, right? So then you start the game. You have your loading screen. So that will take a second. As you can see on the left, actually, as it starts to load, you'll see how it, well, give it a second. Yeah, so as you can see, it's loading. That's how the things here on the left, it loads all the terrains and the imposters. And then I should eventually end up in the game. Oh, I'm in the sky. And I'm falling down. Here I am. So as you can see, you got your name. Well, yeah, you got your name above on your character. Here Thomas has added like UI, but at the minute it's fake. Like it doesn't actually work, but you can like type it. You can type little messages. But this is all like I guess like concept for, you know, showcasing like what's possible. And you got your friends list, and you can add people in the future, and then also your settings. But yeah, and then up here's your money, which is important, so you can like use some of the stuff. And then here you have all like the kind of just basic, what you like, how to like move your character and things like that, which you can also just like toggle off, which with you. So in terms of the game, I mean, it's just a slow process. You know, at the beginning we didn't really have like an entrance area, so we added that, and then I added some plants, and I actually made this this little fence with tables. So I think it's all down to like, you know, getting creative with it and having fun with it. The clients wanted this like signage, this specific signage with like the, you know, how they have it in like America with the pole with the different things kind of pointing in different directions. And I couldn't find that asset, so I went and I took this white thing, made it smaller, I added an image, and here we have the signs. And then I just sort of dotted them around so that, you know, people know where to go and things like that. The game is like, at the minute, made up of all these different assets that we've kind of put together to like, you know, blend them into the world, and hopefully in the future we'll make our own and evolve that. Oh my god, sorry, it lags a bit because of it's constantly loading the terrains. But here's something. We didn't make this specifically, but we've edited it. So like, I wanted there to be an entrance from that side, so I added this sort of pathway using the same pathway from here, so that you can enter it from the left. Sorry, it's being very slow. Okay, I'm stuck behind a flower bed. Right. Sorry. Okay. So at the minute it's daytime, and as we go on, it will become nighttime. There'll be a sunset. You can also have, so if you can actually like edit things. So if I go on Enviro, I think here, you can, I think it's here, you can weather controls. So at the minute it's clear sky. So I think if I add, I don't know, rainy, light rain, it should stop raining. That might, it's frozen. It's not raining. That's fine. These are the kind of things that happen all the time. You just forget how to do something and then it doesn't work, but that's fine. I'm sure that I've just probably done something wrong or changed it somewhere wrong. But when you're editing on the game mode, so say like I want to test something and I need to make sure it's working, I can edit it on the game mode and it doesn't save it. And then when I'm working in the scene, I know then exactly how I need to change it so that you can kind of test it in real time so that you're not constantly like loading the game every time you need to test something. So yeah. It takes practice. At the beginning when I started, it took me months to figure out how to just edit the terrain. And as it went on, I, got a bit better at it, but it's not perfect. Like I always figure out that I've left grass just growing on the road and then I need to go back and edit it again. So as you can see, the sun's coming down now, which is nice. Or we have a nice little building here. So one thing with the building I had an issue with was that all the walls you could walk through them. So I had to make them all, like not see-through like thing. But then also, there's like little things you think of, like there was this glass window here and I thought, oh, well, if I just remove it, you just go through and stand on the balcony and watch the sunset. Although the lighting at the minute of the world is a little bit off, but we're currently working on the next version, so it's slowly going to evolve. And the main focus on this was, and especially when you're making your first game, is to think about how it works and making sure the functionality of it is good, so that all the UI works and that when you're loading it, it works and it doesn't, throw you errors. So. And then after that, you can focus on making your own assets and really go for like the looks of the place and like all that. So I'm not really sure. I guess I can show you the teleport. If I just quickly walk there. So I could change if I go to runtime Gaia player, I think it's third person controller Eve. Is it here? Where the speed is. No. Okay, so you see on game, I can change the speed of the character if I find where it is. Thomas, if you could. Where is it? Move speed multiplier. So at the minute it's 1. I think it's this one. So I think when no. Never mind. Right. I'm going to just keep.
It's fine either way. Like I think the ID comes across what we're doing and what we're working on. It was more to show off where we are and why this lesson came up in the first place.
Okay. So, yeah. So do you want me to finish now? Is that all good?
Yeah, go for it.
Lovely. You can take over and you can explain and you can do your thing. Right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Julia. Okay, so I'll take over from here then. Let me get rid of this one. I don't need this one anymore. So, as the lesson says, we're going to go over a little bit of the basic concepts of Unity, both the like actual UI interface stuff and how Unity itself works, what it's built up of. We'll go over some 3D in the next lesson as well, some animations, some events, all the basic keystones you need to create your own little game. And so the end result of these 2 lessons should be something like this. It's very straightforward. I'm going to show you what we're going for, and then we're going to go over all the steps to get there. So it's very straightforward. You have a main menu. We have a new game button, a settings button that's disabled, so there's no settings right now, and a quit button. So if you click new game, we have a little pop-up, kind of like what we call on a website like a modal or something. And then you can choose new game or cancel. So when you click new game, it will load the game, and then you can walk around and you can turn on your flashlights, you can move around with the flashlights, and you can interact with some objects, whether it's opening a box or going to a door and opening the door. This is what I'm going to be teaching in these next 2 lessons. So very simple stuff. This is called a prototype. But with all these things that you'll be learning in these lessons, you can start off and create something very basic game and it keeps returning in all the possible scenarios, like whether it's like turning the lights off with a switch, or having someone shoot an arrow at you, and if it hits you, you die. Like it's all the same principles. So once you understand these basic key components from Unity, you can do a lot already with Unity without going into too much depth. So let's start with the beginning. Unity is a game engine, and it's not that much different of what we've been doing as programmers as of now, because Unity also works with an object-oriented programming system. It uses C# as a scripting language, and it's also an object-oriented language. So let's start with the beginning. When you start up Unity and you've had it installed, let me open Unity Hub, it will give you Unity Hub, which has some projects. If you're new, it's going to be empty, and some installs where you can actually install which version you want to use. So right now I'm using 2021 2.9. I think I gave that through if you wanted to follow along. If you don't have it installed, it's not a problem. You should be able to follow along anyways. And if you want to try later on your own, feel free to do so. So since we're going from the beginning, we're going to make a new project, and we're going to take a 3D project. Even though obviously an interface or a menu is 2D, it's flat, we're going to do 3D because the game we're playing will be in 3D. So we're just going to call this lesson project live. I don't know, you can call it whatever you feel like. And then we just click on create project, and Unity is going to launch. Now Unity comes with a lot of default classes, as every framework does. Like in Laravel you have controllers, you have models, all of that stuff Unity has as well in its own ways. And everything in Unity is built up of the same kind of components and game objects. Now a game object, you can hear the name object in there, is exactly the same as what we have in an object-oriented language like PHP or JavaScript or like C#, C++. It all comes back, right? Not fuck Python. Python, we don't talk about it. So as you can see, when we start Unity, we have like a little view here, which is called scene, and as you can see, it's 3D. You see like a little skybox, as they call it, which is the sky and the ground. It is just confusing at first, right? So let's start with something that we know. We have a project tab on the bottom, which is the same as like in our coding or Visual Studio Code. Here you'll see all your files. In this case, I have a scene, which is a sample scene, and packages, which is basically Unity's built-in stuff. All of this stuff comes with Unity and allows you to really quickly get into a project. Now, every single thing in Unity in the hierarchy, which is literally what is in this scene. A scene is a level, like whatever you want to show in a step of a game is going to be in a scene. So every single object in the scene is going to be the same thing. It's going to be called a game object. Now a game object by itself is nothing. It is nothing, but it can be anything. And that's the cool part about Unity, is that it's a very straightforward approach and it's very structured. So before I go into this in depth, if you have any questions, feel free to ask here in person or in the chat. I'll try and answer as best as I can. And if I go too quick over something, let me know, because this is the first time as well for me, so bear with me. Now, a game object, as I said, is an object which holds components. A component can be anything. Let's say I want to make a light. So I will add a component called light. And as you can see, we have a little light come up, which is a point light. So you can change that to whatever you want. This is a predefined type of component from Unity, which handles lighting of a scene. But if I say, okay, I don't need a light, I can remove this component. And let's say I want to turn this into an actual mesh, which is like an object. Now, this would be one way to do it. You can also just straight up go to 3D object and a cube, and boom, you'll have a little 3D cube, which is also a game object. It just has a few extra components predefined. So as you can see, this cube is a 3D cube. If you double click on it, it's gonna focus on it and jump to it in the scene. This cube has a mesh, which is a name for a 3D model, like that comes from another software, or like in this case, it's a primitive shape. Unity comes with like a few primitive shapes, like a cube, a cylinder, a sphere, that kind of stuff. And then it also has a collider, which is what handles collision. So if you run with your character against something that has a collision, you can do an action or an event, which can handle with code. But that's for later. We're not going to go too far into that. Basically, all you need to know is that, yes, Luana, this is exactly what it is. It's basically like a layer, and it can have, these components are building stones. So you can add up on top of it. You can create your custom components as well. So let's go into depth on that a little bit. So this first lesson, I'll try and keep it simple. And we're going to switch to 2D view. So we're going to go to 2D because we're going to make a menu. And this scene, we're going to rename the scene, and we're going to call it rename menu scene. There you go. So now this is called menu scene. We have a camera, we have a directional light. We don't even need that directional light because there doesn't need to be a light. It's just 2D. Now we're switching from 3D to 2D, and traditionally 2D artists, you're basically working on a canvas usually if you're painting or anything. So it's the same thing here in Unity. It's called a canvas. So if you go to UI, you have a bunch of 2D related stuff. One of them is canvas. So we're adding a canvas to the scene. As you can see, this has this white outline which defines the boundary of this canvas. So again, we have a few components, and this canvas has a canvas component. Coincidental, right? This is like unheard of. You would never expect it. So let me move this open a little bit. This has a few options, parameters as you want to call them, since again it's an object. It has parameters and functions, and anything you can imagine as an object does, it has it. So this canvas has some settings. Let's say you have screen space overlay, which is just put it on top of everything else going on in the background, which is usually what you do with a UI. Like whether that's a chat box on your game or a main menu, it's always going to be on the front, and it's going to be the thing you see. And you have camera, which you can just predefine a camera in your scene to actually show as it shows, like if for that camera, which is helpful if you have to do your UI on a specific location, like sideways or something. But that's more in depth. And in world space, if you literally want to have it like in the world as an object, which is like if you have like, for example, if you want to have a TV screen that you want to be able to interact on, that's when you would use that. But we're going to go very simple. We're going to stick with overlay. We're not going to change any of that. We're going to keep all these settings standard. Now, this is a very straightforward setup. So on this canvas, we're going to make our main menu. So on the left, we'll have our menu, and on the right, we'll have all the details of whatever menu we're in. As most games do it, they'll have like a settings thing on the left side, and then it opens the settings on the right side. Makes sense. So what we're going to start with is we're going to split up this canvas. So we're going to go down to UI, and we see we have a bunch of stuff here. But the main one I'm interested in is panel. So let me make a panel. As you can see, this fills up the entire canvas automatically normally. It has again some standard settings, parameters. It has a position, which is the left, top, right, bottom. It has scales, it has pivots. This will come back later, but for this I don't really need to go too much into it. The main thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this panel smaller, so it's just the size of how I want to make my menu. So since I always want to align this panel on the left side of my screen, I can actually click on here and say where I want to anchor it. So anchoring is basically like positioning in HTML. If you click on the left side here, it's going to position it to the left side in the middle. And then you see this anchor moves over here. This is helpful in case you have, for example, a screen size that is really big. It still needs to know where it needs to position it. Otherwise, it's just going to position it at the coordinate you set. So while it is in 2D, you still have 2D space. You have X coordinate, you have a Y coordinate. It's a grid system. So you want to align to the left side of the grid. And it also has a second component, which is called image. Now you can change this to be a different image. If I want to be like another image, I can change it. Right now I don't have any, so let me actually bring some in. So let's go to Files. I'm going to go to Home, 3D Lesson, Assets, Art, Images. I will upload these later if you want to follow along with the video at another time. I was going to do it at first, but I figure it's going to be easier to follow if I do it like this. So I just created a new folder, like it's the same as Visual Studio Code. You right click, create folder. I call it art. And inside that art folder, I'm going to do the same. Right click, create folder. I'm going to call it images. Why I do separate folders? It's very straightforward. There's more to art than just images. You have models, you have animations, you have visual effects. Those are all things that are considered art, and it's really good to keep structure in your project. So all the scripts you would put in a script folder, all the art you would put in a folder inside the art folder. So that's what I'm going to do. So inside the images folder, I am just going to drag these files. And now you'll see all these files are over here. So for this panel, I am just going to use a UI sprite, and I'm going to turn this black. And I'm also going to put the transparency to 0 transparency. Okay, so the question, align left stretch. So if you do align left stretch like this, if you hold down Alt, you can like stretch to take the full screen or stretch partially to the container of this element. It's a little bit complex. Basically, it will stretch it if the screen is bigger than what it currently is. As you can see, this is a 4:3. Let's say you have a 16:10 monitor. It needs to know. So usually you would put it on stretch because it needs to stretch vertically. Horizontally, we don't really care because it's the width we want it to be, right? So now we have our panel. Basically, we're going to rename this panel and we're just going to call this menu to keep it easy for us. So this is going to be everything menu related. So usually in the menu you have a few components. Again, you'll have probably a logo of the game on top or the title. Then you'll have some buttons like new game, quit game, settings. So we'll start there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go again to UI, and I'm going to go to image, and I'm just going to call this logo. And then here you can see I imported all these images, and they're imported as textures. Now textures, you can use those, but what I like to do, and what I think is the best thing as well if you use them for UI elements, is you change them to sprites. So I selected all of them. I'm going to convert them into a sprite, because as you can see, this is for 2D and UI. And then you can just click apply. There we go. So now you can see that every image has like a little sprite thing now, which is like a pivot point, the border, all this kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this logo into the source image, which is supposed to be a sprite. It always says what it expects. So it expects a sprite file. So now if you zoom in, we can see that we have the logo here. So we'll keep going for a bit and then we'll go over some other elements. So first we have the logo. Now we're going to add some basic buttons. We're not going to go too crazy. We're just going to call it, take a button with Text Mesh Pro. Text Mesh Pro is something from Unity that allows you to style the text a little bit more fancy. It has a bit more than a regular button. So let's go with that. Now it's complaining. It's like, okay, I need this. And so please import it. Unity is nice like that. It usually tells you if it's missing something. So you can literally just click on the button and it's going to import everything it needs. There you go. We're going to skip on the examples and extras because I'm going to be the one that explains the examples and the extras. So we can just move this around if we want. We will, in one of the next steps, actually align this automatically so it adjusts to the screen size, which is a smart thing to do, but for now I'll just drag it around. So here we have our button. This is going to be our new game button. New game button. So I'm renaming it in the hierarchy. That doesn't change the text on the button. You'll be like, why doesn't it do that? I just renamed it. That's because inside the button we have a little text component, like a game object with the actual texts. And as you can see here, this thing actually has the UI element TextMesh Pro. So if we change here and we call this new game, you'll see it actually change, which is helpful. Now, I don't really like this button. This look is pretty bad. So I'm going to use another sprite again. And every button also has an image component. So let's say I'm going to take my example button and I'm going to drag that up here. I completely didn't rip this button off or this art off from another game. You might know it, but it's just for an example, right? So now we have our little button and our text is a little bit too big, so let's scale that down a little bit. And since the color doesn't really stand out, let's change the color of the text to white. This is all very straightforward, right? It's just changing some parameters in some objects that are very straightforward. If you have any questions or if I go too quick, let me know. Again, I can only learn as well. So yeah, now we have a button. So now we want two more buttons. We want a settings button and a quit button. So I'm just going to copy paste this twice because I'm lazy. So I'm going to call this one settings button. And I'm going to call this one quit button. Always use proper naming, makes it easier for you later as well to find what you're working with. So this button, I'm going to drag down a little bit and I'm going to call this one, if you go down to the text inside of it, settings, and then quit. I'm going to drag down a little bit as well. I'm going to go to the text element and I'm going to call it quit. Now, I'm going to select all three of the buttons. So as you can see, this also has a component called button. It's helpful because it's a button. You want it to work like a button. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to a sprite swap instead of a color tint. The reason why is you can use color tint to change the color of the image, or in this situation, we're going to sprite swap it. So the reason why we're doing that is because this works like CSS and HTML. Like if you hover over something, you can change the color of something. In this case, we're doing exactly the same. We're going to hover over the button. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a transition to a different sprite. As you can see, I have a sprite here called highlighted, right?
The transition is if you hover over the button.
It can be anything. So as you can see, it has some default transitions. So highlighted sprite, press sprite. These are standard behaviors of a button. If you highlight like highlighting is hovering.
Yeah, but then if you do sprite swap, then for all of the options below, it will also be sprite swap?
No. So each of these options has its own sprite. So if it says none, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to keep the standard state. So the standard sprite. But let's say I want to have a highlighted sprite, and as you can see, I created a highlighted sprite. I can just drag this in here, and as you can see, I selected multiple buttons. If these elements are the same, it will be able to handle this multiple actions on multiple elements, which is really helpful, especially if you're dealing with a lot of things that you have to change at once. So we have the highlighted sprite now, and we have a disabled one. As you can see, I have one prepared as well for disabled. Now, I don't need settings, because settings is a little bit complex for the first lesson. We're not going to go over that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this button. I'm going to set it's not interactable. And you'll see instantly the sprite changes because it's disabled. So this allows you to really quickly set up a basic UI. So now if I would play the scene, playing like, as in like running the game, you'll see it will run. Here's a little game. As you can see, this menu is stretched like crazy. So it's way too stretched. But if I go over new game or quit, you can see that it actually changes color, right? So as you can see, if I now go to the canvas, for some reason this canvas got stretched really bad. And the reason why is because I'm using a constant pixel size. So basically I wanted to scale with the screen size, because if my screen gets bigger or smaller, that would be confusing if my menu is suddenly super small, right? So I'm gonna scale with screen size, and as you can see, everything makes a lot more sense now in size-wise. So now I won't have that issue anymore. If I run the game, you'll see now the menu is actually the correct size. As you can see, it has a little bit of rounded corners because I'm using UI Sprite. If I would change this to none, that would be gone. So UI Sprite is a standard Unity panel image, which has rounded borders and a little bit of a margin on the side. So usually I just get rid of that for my panel, or I use a custom panel. Now, this isn't aligned properly at all. This logo is in the middle. These buttons are like towards the bottom of the screen. I kind of want to like to auto layout this stuff. Like kind of like, I don't know if anyone is familiar with CSS, you know, Flex Container. Flex Container allows you to align things according to its parent. So we're going to do the same thing. So our parent of our menu, where the logo and the buttons are in, is called menu. We're going to add a component. This is what I mean. You can use these building blocks, and by adding a vertical layout group, we can actually structure how it positions everything. Again, right now it looks weird because it's all aligned to the top left, but if I change the alignment to middle center, it's already starting to look a little bit better. So as you can see, the spacing is very big though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some padding on the top, and I'm going to add some padding on the bottom. Still not enough, so I'm going to change it to 100. So it brings everything a little bit more closer, and the spacing between the elements I'm going to make 10. There's a few more things I can do here, but this is enough to start with. So if I save the scene, I'll play again. Now we have this. As you can see, this stuff is back. Why is this rounded corners back? I just changed it. That's because I made that change while the game was running. So whenever you're running the game, any change you do doesn't get saved. So if I move this button here, I won't be able to if I change this because of the automatic layout changes. But if I change this panel position and I check the game, the panel is moved. But if I stop the game, it's going to be put back on its original position. So that's a good thing to remember. If you do changes, make sure you're not in play mode. You want to be in edit mode. There's a few exceptions, but we're not going to go into that. That's too.
Can you save a change so you just need to remember?
Yeah. So that's a little bit annoying. I know. But at least the fun part is that when you're running the game, you can still see what's going on inside the scene. So let's say you want to try and make a change. You can do that. Let's say I don't like the menu on the left. Let me put it on the right. So I'm going to align it to the right. And then I'm going to put the position to 0. And as you can see in the game, now it's on the right. I accidentally clicked on something. Yeah, to the right. But obviously you need to put an offset because my width is not correct. Like I have to actually offset for half of the width of the element, because otherwise you just put the middle exactly there. You can change that with the anchor points, but again, this is more details for Tuesday's lesson. So we have our little menu, new game, settings, quit. I want to be able to bring up a confirmation box. let's say when you click on new game, I want to make a little pop-up that says, are you sure you want to do this? How would you go about that? Well, it's straightforward. You just do the same principle as we just did. We make a new panel, and we call it new game dialog. You can call it whatever you feel like, as long as you remember what it means.
Does the position matter?
You can change it wherever you want. It doesn't really matter.
The position inside the exploring the hierarchy.
The only thing that matters is that it's inside the canvas.
Okay.
So again, this is like, you have to be a little bit logical about your approach where you put everything, because it's like HTML. Its parent's position affects their position as well.
Yeah, but I mean, it won't like go over the menu if you put it under or above, right?
Well, the higher in the hierarchy, the closer, like the first it draws it.
Okay.
So that is like a point, yes. So in my case,
It's below menu, so it will be behind it.
depends on how you set it up. Again, that's a little bit in depth. Like, there's some ways you can go around it, but not really important at this point. The main thing is if you move it, like, it's behind. If you draw it behind it, it's in front. See? So you can get around that by setting, it's kind of like Z-index and CSS, but in reality, the easiest way is just ordering it properly in the hierarchy, right? So let's have a little frame here. As you can see, we have our frame. I'm gonna make it really big because I wanna show you something. So we have an image here called frame panel. I'm gonna drag that on here, and we're gonna be like, okay, this looks like crap, right? Like this doesn't look right. Why is this changing? This makes no sense. So that's because this is just placed it there as an image. If I change this and make the most ridiculous size, it's gonna keep its dimension of the image. But for a panel, you can do something really cool. You can go to the actual sprite, and you can click on the sprite editor. And again, it says, oh, I don't have this. So we have to get it. This is something you're gonna use a lot when you're doing UIs. This is something you have to get. So it says, please download 2D sprite package from Package Manager. So let's go over Package Manager. This is basically the asset store from Unity. Most of it is free, except like premium stuff that users made specifically. So if you go to Window, and we go to Package Manager, we'll actually get a little window here called Package Manager, which has some standard built-in stuff. Here we go. This is everything that's currently installed in the project. So you can see this is our Text Mesh Pro, which is for the button. We have our UI, but you can change this. And you can change to My Assets, which is specifically the ones that I got from the asset store, and it's gonna look for the ones I installed. So as you can see, I have one prepared for the next lesson, which is like a character controller, but that's not here what I need. So Unity has its own registry, which is like all the basic stuff. So here, there's a lot of stuff. But obviously, if it would always come with everything, every project would be really big in size. So we don't want that. So if we need something, we specifically go get it. So if we go to top, we can see 2D Sprite here, which is the Unity Sprite Editor window. So this is what we need, so we'll install it. There we go. And now it's importing. This takes a moment. So one thing you'll see a lot with compiling C# script, Unity checks every single C# file in the project and kind of like indexes it. So you can call a class from anywhere or move the file and it's gonna know where it is. You don't have to actually reference like classes yourself. Like there's a few exceptions, again, like all the things like from Package Manager you have to import, but you can reference other classes because Unity keeps track of where all these scripts are. So we imported this now. It's in our project. If I go down to packages, you should see 2D Sprite. And there you go. So now if I go to Frame Panel and click on Sprite Editor, we actually have our Sprite Editor. Now, as you can see, this is the image, and there's like these green little dots up here. And this allows us to actually cut off where it needs to start stretching the image. So I say this needs to always be on top in this format. I don't want this to be stretched vertically. Otherwise, what you end up with is, like if I close this and I don't change, if I scale this and I make it like the bottom is like, you can see it stretches insane amounts, right? So we don't want that. So that's why we're going to tell Unity how to actually do the stretching. As you can see, if I put the border underneath here, it's going to ignore everything above it and just draw it like that. And everything underneath it, it's going to stretch. Obviously, we don't want the bottom border to be stretched as well, so we just pull the bottom bar up to here. Same for the left thing. We don't want this little ornament on the side to be stretched, so we'll just do it like this. And on the right side, like this. Now we hit apply. And if we check now, and I change this to like -800, oh, I need to re-put the image on there, the sprite. As you can see, the top stays the same. The middle is obviously overstretched because I'm dramatic, like making it more dramatic for the stream, but it's the same principle. So now if I scale this, you'll see it's just the bottom side that scales and the middle part between the ornaments. So that allows you, obviously this frame is very low quality, like for the art piece, but it allows you to like make something that is stylable, stretchable, and keeps its shape. Now we have our dialogue. We're gonna add some basic components to it, right? So this is gonna be our new game dialogue. So what we need is, again, the same thing. We need some text. So we're gonna add some fancy text to it. And we're going to align that to the top. So this is our anchor position. As you can see, my position is -200 now because it's going down. So if I set this to 0, it's going to align it at the top. This makes it very easy to align things to a specific space on the dialogue. Let's say I scroll it down, say to -80. That's not far enough. -100. It's a little bit too far, so let's scroll it up. If you click on this, you see you have a little scroll wheel, so you can actually easily scroll this. Let's align it to the middle. This is just text editor. It's the same as Word or anything like it. It's just a text component. So we're gonna change this text to start new game. As you can see, it starts a new line. I don't want that, so let's make this text field a little bit bigger. There's some automated stuff you can do that it automatically stretches to the text. I won't go too in depth in that. Again, these are standard components. You can do size fitter, which is going to like change the size of the container to whatever is in the container. But there's so many components, I can't go over all of them, not in like one lesson. But this should get you started with the basic UI. So this is way too big. Let's change it down to like 18. There we go. So this is our title. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add to the dialogue new text. It's going to be your description. Are you sure that you want to start a new game? Question. Again, font is way too big. Let's change it down to like 16. And we're gonna align it to the middle, and we're gonna make this as big as the panel.
So now when you stretch it is relative to the panel?
Yes. So if this panel changes, this stays the same, but it stays in the middle because it's aligned to the middle. See, that's why the alignment does matter. This, you can make it stretch automatically to the dialogue. That would again be with like the content size fitter. And then you can say like preferred size, and it's gonna scale it to the size of that thing. But yeah, you need a layout component for that as well, so it gets a little bit more complicated. For now, I'm just sticking with like this easy stuff. You can go more in depth on like these layout components on your own time. I have to condense it in 2 hours. So yeah, the main thing is that you understand how anchor points work, position works, and like structure, like the link. How do you tie it together in a hierarchy? So we need 2 buttons. We need a confirm and a cancel button. So I'm going to create both. I'm just going to create the first button. Let me turn off this. And this one we're going to call yes. Yes button. And we're going to change the text to be yes. I'm going to change this to white. Don't worry about that. We'll fix that in a second. So I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to call this no button. And the text here I'm going to change to no. Now, as you can see, they're again on top of each other. We don't like that. Like, we kind of want them to be next to each other, aligned properly to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these buttons. And this is something, again, think about each component. The top is the title, the middle is the description, and the bottom is all the buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this, and I'm going to do create empty parent, which is going to group them. So now we have a little game object parent of these buttons. And I'm going to call these buttons, which is, it has nothing in there. And I'm going to change the scale of this. As you can see, I'm going to change this to be the same width as the frame. There we go. So now I want these buttons to be aligned next to each other horizontally instead of vertically. So instead of a vertical one, we're going to add a horizontal layout group. There we go. It does it for us. So again, we're going to align them to the center in the middle. And we're going to align this button group to the bottom. There we go. So now it's aligned to the bottom of its parent container, which is the dialog. Now these buttons look weird in white. It's that UI sprite again. I want my own little buttons. So I'm going to, again, drag a little button icon on there. And again, same thing. I'm going to sprite swap this, and it's going to have a small little highlight.
Can't you copy the same components from the first button and put them in?
Yes, I can. Although these buttons are not the same image, so it's like, I just wanted to go over it again and just like reiterate. Yes, but you can. If I go to, let's say, settings, and I want to be like, okay, I want to copy this, you can just click on these little dots, and you can say copy component. And then you can go to here and be like, okay, this button, I don't need this shit anymore. Remove this button. Now the button is still here because it has its image, right? But the component to actually click on it is gone. So you can click here and click here, sorry, and paste component is new. And you'll see it brings back this button thing, and it has these example buttons, but obviously it's not the right button. So let me put the right button in here, and then I don't have it disabled, so I'm just going to set this to none, and I'm going to enable that button again. So that's another thing that you have to be careful though. So as you saw, I copied this from the other button, right? But now you see this target graphic is actually that other button's image. We don't want that. We want it to be this object's image. So what you can just do is you just click on the image and you drag it down, and boom. Now the target graphic is the correct image. Like, this is the image you can change. So if you wanted to, then you wanted to, like this button, if you target it to affect another image, you can do that. I don't see why you want to, but it's possible. So we have our little dialogue. Let's make it a little bit smaller. As you can see, these buttons are quite big, so we'll change that as well. So here, what is that beeping? So we're going to need to align this to the middle. So 0. And description, this is a little bit wide. So what you can do is you can actually set, I forgot what it was called. There's a component where you can say the maximum width an element can be before it like shrinks it. I forgot the name of the component, but again, there's so many components. A lot of the stuff is in the documentation for Unity. It's really good, so I won't go too much into details. Now, we have all these elements. How do we actually work with them? So I'm gonna go over the basic interactions. You can do it through scripting with C#, which is entirely possible, but that makes it a lot harder. Let's say an artist is not going to be able to program this, but you can also do it in the interface from Unity itself. So the dialog only shows when we're clicking on a new game, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to standardly turn it off, so it's not there. Now, when I click on this new game button, you can see there's an on-click event. It's like JavaScript. It also has events. So when you click on the button, you can say what it needs to do. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to do something. If I click on this new game thing, I want that dialog to show up. So here it says, what object do you want to do? I'm going to go and drag this dialog in there. And it's like, no function. It doesn't know what to do yet. So I'm going to tell it, let's go to game object. And I'm going to say this object that I just gave, I want it to set it to active. If I click on yes, it's going to activate this object in the scene. So if we play this, you'll see we have our little highlights. Now if I click on new game now, it brings up the model. And now we have these interactions as well. It looks like nothing good. I'm not going to use curse words, but well, not more than I already do. But it looks really bad. But that's besides the point. We're just trying to get the functionality to work and to understand how to build this stuff up. Now, we can do the same thing with code. So I'm going to show now how you actually would make your own custom script. Let's say I want to make a script to close the application if I click on the quick button. So usually what you would do is you right click on the menu and you can add, well, you can go here and add a component called script, but I like to do it, make the script first in my proper folder. So I'm going to create a folder called scripts. That way everything gets bundled together properly and you don't have to look through your entire project to actually find where all your scripts are. So in this one, I'm going to create a C# script and I'm going to call it menu controller. You can call it menu manager, whatever. I like to call it controller because it's the same functionality we usually do with a controller. We control the behaviors, we write our functions. So we created our little menu controller. And as you can see, it comes with some basic stuff. So what I want to do now is I want to open this menu controller. So I'm going to double click on it and you'll see I have a menu controller here. And this looks very much like what we're used to in PHP and whatnot, right? This has the class, mono behavior, start, and an update function. Now, what is mono behavior? Mono behavior is default class for Unity game objects. It has a bunch of default features, so we don't have to worry about it too much, but that's where it comes from. Start, it comes with some comments as well. The moment the game loads for this scene, this function will be called and it's going to execute anything that's inside that start function. Update gets called every frame that gets drawn. So basically, when your game runs at 60 FPS, you'll have this update function 60 times. That can be very dangerous because, like, if your computer runs at 300 frames per second, and you do something every update check, you have to take that into account because you can give some players an advantage when they have faster frame rate than other frame rate. You have to like manage that. But that's future story. You can also make your own little functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a public void, and I'm going to call this quit application. And in here, I'm going to use a standard feature from Unity, and it's going to be called application.quit. And disclaimer, when you run a game in Unity itself, this function will not work. It will only work when the game is actually built. So to show that it actually gets to this function, we're going to use a debug log. It's the same like a console log or a print in like other languages. You can debug what's going on in your code in Unity. So in this moment, we're quitting the application. C#, so always end with point, comma. We're going to save this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, as you saw, Unity instantly compile the script so it knows what's in there. I'm going to add the script to our menu. So add component. I'm going to find that script, menu controller, boom, it's here. Now, this is not going to do anything by itself. I can do here, oh, there's a compiler error. Fun. I've never seen this one before.
Just need to type Unity engine dot debug log because it's confusing because you're also using system. Dot, yeah, that will work.
Fun. Okay, thanks. So, Andre to the rescue. If I play now, as you can see, we have on the bottom here our little console. If I press on quit, it's not going to do anything because I didn't tie that feature to it yet. So while the script is attached to our menu, we didn't really tell the menu yet when it needs to call this function. So we want to do this when the user clicks on the quit button. So again, we have the button, we have on click. So what I do here is I'm going to click on the plus. I'm going to drag my menu on there. Now if I look here, you see there's a new menu here called menu controller. And then here you see our function quit application is actually in here. So if I set that up now, and now I run the game, and now I click on quit, you'll see on the bottom it says quitting the application. So you can see the function got fired, it's executing it. Like I said, in the editor, you cannot actually quit the application because it's not actually an application. It's just running inside of the editor. But we see it gets to that point. Now, the next thing I want to do is, okay, so we're creating our new game. We have our little dialogue thing. We have our no button. So we don't want to do this. We want to hide this modal again and go back to the menu. Same principle. We take the dialog, we go to game object, set active, and we say not active. And then it's going to hide that modal for like as soon as you click on no to show that. Obviously I started it with it open, so that's another thing. We can fix that as well, but we have our new game. When you click on no, it hides it again. So all these functions starting to work. Now the next thing I want to do is when you click on yes, I want to load the actual game. So we're going to make a new scene. So we're going to the scenes folder, create scene. We're calling this one first level. Now when I open this, I'm going to save this one. It's just going to have the same standard template. So I'm just going to put a cube in here to show it's actually this one. So cube, boom. Here it is. I'm going to go out of 2D view because we don't want that. And I'm going to align the camera with view. So this is what we'll see when we get in this scene. So we're saving this level. We're going back to the menu scene. Now, going back to 2D view mode, we're gonna focus on the canvas, and there is our canvas. Now, to load the scene, we actually go back to our code, and we're gonna create a new function called public void load world, or load whatever you wanna call it. This is again your own naming. So Unity again has something built in. It's called Scene Manager. So as in every other like language, we have to import that feature. So this one comes with Unity Engine.Scene Management. As you can see, Lint knows it. If I just do this, there we go. Now I can actually use this. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm actually going to use that scene manager and say load scene. I think it is load scene at least. Yeah. And then I'm going to say first level. There we go. It's compiling. Yada, yada, yada. Everything's good. No errors in the console. So now, when I click on the yes button, I again want to trigger that function. So I'm bringing my menu in there again because this one has the menu controller attached to it. I go down and I say load world. There you go. So now when I play this, again I forgot to close the hide the dialog, which we can fix. We have our little, let me hide it first. So when you click on new game, it's asked, are you sure? And you click yes. Oh, could not be loaded. So the reason why that happens is because for Unity to know what scenes you're actually using, you have to tell it. So this is a very simple solution. You go to File and Build Settings. It says it in the error, right? To add a scene to the build settings, use File, Build Settings. Boom. So now it says there's no scenes here. So I'm gonna add the open scene, which is the menu. I'm also gonna go to Project, and this first level, I'm just gonna drag it in here. And then you can just close it. And now if we do it, it's going to work. Hopefully, otherwise I'd be a very bad teacher. So now if I click yes, there's my cube. We're in that scene. As you can see on the left, it changed the scene, and we're in our actual world now. That world we're gonna make in the next lesson. For now, we're gonna stick on to the menu. Now let's say this new game dialog, I keep forgetting to close it. I'd like it to automatically close, right? Like, that would be helpful. So there's a few ways you can go about that. You can do it with code. Like I said, when you start, this start function gets called. So what you can do is we can say, okay, we're going to declare a public game object, and it's going to be called dialog window. So here we're declaring something publicly. And the nice thing about Unity is if it's public, that means you can edit it inside the editor. So if we go now and you look at this menu controller, you'll see it got a new field here. Actually, dialog window, and it expects a game object. If I would change this to string, it would expect a string, and then it would be an input field. Now, here I say this dialog window is this. So now I can actually use that parameter in my script to address what needs to happen with that dialog window. Let's say I go to start function now, and I'll say dialog window, set active, false. So now basically what I'm saying is the moment the game starts, I want that element, that game object, to be deactivated. So we're going to test that in the canvas. We're going back to 2D mode. I'm going to enable this dialog just to test it. I'm going to run the game. So if everything works as expected, it's automatically going to hide it. And it's taking a moment. And it did not. So let's have a look why it did not. Oh, because I opened the wrong. I had my own version open, so I opened the wrong Unity. That's not good. So we were in my test. That was not smart. So as you can see, now we're gonna run it properly. My bad. There we go. So now you see the new dialog disappeared. We still have all the other features, it all works. Good.
So I missed one thing. How did this now get linked with the new game button?
Excuse me?
When you click new game button, this now opens, right? But
Yeah.
you didn't specifically link it.
I think I did. So when you go to the new game button, I talked about the event listener. So here, I added this dialog as the object and then used the set active feature in here, which is a default action, and then just set it to true. So it's just a toggle.
It's not a hierarchy or something.
No. No. This you can drag any object from the world in there. So if I want to be really obnoxious, if I say, okay, if you want to quit, I don't want you to quit my application. So what I can do is literally just be like, I'm going to turn the camera off. So set active false. And if we run this and we click on quit, you're actually not going to see anything anymore. It's going to be black screen. If I don't suck. Oh, well, it doesn't because it's editor, but if it was the actual game, it would just say black screen because as you see, there are no cameras rendering. So you can target any object you want like that. It can literally be like 30 levels deep or like the first object in your scene. It doesn't matter. All you need to do is drag and drop in there. You can target it. So obviously I don't want the quit button to do that, so I'm gonna undo that. So, sorry, menu controller, quit application, there we go. So, let's say I don't always want to load specifically that level. How would I make it so I can pass a custom parameter to the script? It's very straightforward as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a public string, like I said earlier, and I'm going to call that level name. And then instead of here, first level, I'm just going to pass that parameter, level name. So now if I go back to the editor, there should be a field in the inspector window that is called level name. So if I go to the menu and I go here, you can see there's a field, level name. So I will call this first level. So if I run this, and I click on new game and I say yes, it still loads that even though it's a parameter now. So you can do a lot of things. You can pass any information, and this is really helpful because that allows you to make custom components. So all these components I've been showing you, image and like text or anything, are Unity's pre-made scripts. But you can make your own components as you want. In my case, I made a menu controller that handles everything that needs to happen in the menu. So you can also organize it a little bit. Let's say I want to call this, this is going to be level to load. And if I go back to the editor now, you'll see that the menu now has a little separation with actual like sections. So if you have a lot of information, it's helpful to do this stuff. You can go crazy in depth and start displaying things in the inspector window, but I'm not going to go over that. But it allows you to set up your own little scripts and pass parameters, pass game objects. There's other ways to address these game objects. You can search through the scene automatically and just let the script handle it, which is slower because the script will have to check every element if it matches. Or you can do it like this. I think I've been going for like a little bit over an hour, so I think I probably should take a break now. Yeah, because I'm also reaching pretty much the end where I wanted to go over for the UI stuff. It's a little bit a lot, and I've been probably going relatively fast. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, because I think for the UI stuff, we're pretty much good to see like all the basic elements. Because with all these features, you can create an interface, whether it's in the game or not, whether it's like a menu or a health bar or an icon of a player or like text, you can set it up. There's a few more things I can teach you, but these are like the basic ones that I wanted to go over with, and then in like future lessons we can probably go more in depth. But yeah, do anyone have any questions?
I don't know, did you cover scaling of that thing? How do you make it fit any screen?
Do you mean?
People are playing on different screens. So I have a screen of HD and then somebody else much bigger, so it might look very small.
So I went over that. So in Canvas, you have scale with screen size, and this is your reference resolution. So I made this now for 800, 600, but if I made that for 980, 1080, you can see this changes completely, right? And it's going to take whatever you gave. So I obviously don't want to keep this. I'm going to go back to 800, 600, because that's what I made it for. Normally you would take the actual normal screen space, 1920, 1080. And then what it will do is going to scale it according to either the width or the height, depending on what you set it up for. In my case, I have set it to width, so it's going to scale to match whatever I have predefined to the width. In this case, it's more important to set it to height, because the menu is the only thing that stretches to like the full height of the screen, right? Everything else, it doesn't really matter, because like nothing stretches on that side. Nothing needs to fill the entire screen. So usually you want to match it with the height. And then the second thing that affects that is this stretch feature. So this panel gets stretched to fit the exact height of the screen. You can do that by clicking here. It's also aligned to the left now. And it sets the pivots and everything too. Like, it's quite a lot of stuff that goes on here. But I'll go more in depth on pivots in the next lesson, because we'll actually need pivots for 3D space a lot. For UI, it's a little bit less important. The main important thing about UI is anchoring. So you align it to the left side of the container, like the canvas, or you align it to the top, you align it to the bottom. That stuff is the main key. Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Okay. As you can see, this frame is a little bit see-through. That's because the color of the panel is set to see-through. So if I set this to full color, it will actually be solid. But yeah.
Something else. What is the point in making this 2D, but it is actually still 3D, right?
Because you're using sprites. If you wanted to, you could like do it in 3D. Basically, it's still in 3D. If I add a cube here to the scene, let's say, like I add a cube, you'd still see that cube in 3D, but since you're working on a canvas, canvas is like by nature 2D. What you can do is put that 2D canvas in 3D space. Like I said, that depends on like what you set it up here. If you set it as overlay, it's always going to be 2D at the front of everything. If I set this in screens or world space, you actually have to define which camera affects it, because a canvas can be clicked on, and that allows the buttons to work. So it needs to know what camera it needs to look from to see those button clicks. It's a little bit more complicated, but in reality, you're not going to be using that feature too much, because basically every UI gets made at the front of the actual like game. It's more like if, like, let's say you have a little computer screen in the game itself in 3D space, and you have to click on a button there, then it would be in the actual world space. Yeah. So Unity is always in 3D by itself. Like, you can start a 2D project, but it's just going to be as well like this. That's another thing. Like, if I open Blender, I have mixed 2D and 3D there. The interface is 2D, and you'll see it in the world, but it's not going to be actually shown in that position in the world in the game. It's literally going to be put in front. It's just rendered completely differently by Unity itself. That's more technical. Any other questions? Okay, so that was it for like the basic interface stuff. I'll upload the images I use for this if you want to try it yourself as well at home in a zip file, and I'll throw it in Skype. For next lesson, the next lesson is a little bit more fun, because there we'll actually start making a game. So the next lesson will actually go over 3D, some basic fundamentals of what it takes to like make a game prototype. So we're talking about character controllers, we're talking about cameras, we're talking about interaction with objects and collisions. So we'll make these chests openable. We'll have some animations that the cover of the chest actually opens up, and we'll be able to open the door as well by interacting with it. So those key components will help a lot to make like whatever type of basic game you want. Obviously, you'll need to go advanced on those concepts, but those concepts are the basics, and that's what I want to go over. So yeah, if there's any questions or suggestions, again, this was my first lesson. I'm sorry if it was a little bit disjointed. I tried my best, but yeah. Feel free to let me know on Skype or anything.
Cool, thank you.
That was very clear, Thomas.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope so. It was.
Don't forget to mute the mic.
It is muted. Yeah, like I said, the UI lesson is not that fun. It's kind of boring.
It's something we need.
So I had to take the fucking call.
You're fine.
Bloody you.
I just stopped streaming, right?
Yeah, it's